Okay, we'll start with this per tweet from Manuk Akopiang. Caleb Plant is asking for $10 million to fight Canelo Alvarez. Fair or foul? Here's what Canelo's most recent foes were reportedly paid. Sergey Kovalev got $12 million. Daniel Jacobs got $12 million. Billy Joe Saunders got $8 million. Callum got $6 million. Avni Yildirim got $2 million. Caleb wants to fall somewhere in between there. $10 million. If I'm being honest, I don't think that's asking a lot. This is an undisputed fight, undisputed super middleweight title fight. The crowds are almost back. I mean, they're almost all the way back. They broke the indoor record.
Billy Joe Saunders fight.
They added another 1,000 seats to what was the already sold-out Devin Haney versus Jorge Linares fight coming up real soon. The crowds are back. The money is there. So I think the $10 million is a reasonable asking price from Caleb Plant. Though a part of me wonders, could it really be that simple? Could the difference between this fight happening and not happening
10 mil.
be
That's it.
Could it really be that simple? That the PBC will let Caleb Plant go ahead with this fight, let him go over there to DAZN and have that fight with Canelo Alvarez for an asking price of $10 million. Could it really be that simple? Because you guys know I'm of the opinion that something might happen and this fight will dematerialize. And I'd love to be wrong about this. I'd love for it to be Canelo Alvarez versus Caleb Plant for the undisputed super middleweight championship towards the end of the summer. I'd love for that to be the case.
And we'll find out if it is soon enough.
It almost seems too good to be true that they'd allow Caleb Plant to lock horns with Canelo Alvarez, who's widely favored to beat him after a very uninspiring showing from Caleb, albeit a dominant showing. It was an uninspiring one, lacking wow factor, greatly lacking wow factor in his last outing against Caleb Truax.
Ho-hum.
Could it really be as simple as just giving Caleb Plant the $10 million he's asking for and going through with the fight? Tell you something, if that's what it takes, Canelo Alvarez ought to just give him the goddamn money. He's not asking for more than Danny Jacobs or Sergey Kovalev got, right?
Right.
$10 million, no strings attached. You do the fight. Canelo gets to have the fight. Maybe becomes the undisputed champion. That brings us closer to a lot of other fights that, you know what? Might be perceived as being more interesting than a Caleb Plant fight. Like a David Benavidez fight to some. Like a Jermall Charlo fight to others. Maybe Demetrius Andrade. Maybe a rubber match with Gennady Golovkin. Getting this fight over the line brings the boxing community that much closer to those fights. And that will help to quell some of the constant crying and complaining we've been seeing as of late in reference to Canelo Alvarez's opponents, who, for some, they're just not impressed. They're not satisfied. They're not satisfied with Canelo Alvarez having fought Callum Smith, unbeaten Billy Joe Saunders. Some of them, they're not even satisfied with him fighting unbeaten Caleb Plant. They're not satisfied with Canelo unifying this division and potentially becoming its undisputed champion, if you can believe that. There are some people that ain't satisfied. They're not satisfied that he's fighting more often than their favorite fighter. They're not satisfied that he's unifying more titles and more divisions than their favorite fighter. They're not satisfied with this stuff. Well, the sooner they get this fight over the line, the sooner Canelo Alvarez can give their favorite guy a shot.
No strings attached.
And in one way, shape, or form, or another, Canelo's going to have to. I heard some talk of Canelo Alvarez wanting to fight in the United Kingdom. And I thought to myself, if he were to try to fight in the United Kingdom beyond this Caleb Plant fight, assuming that he wins it, and I think he will, if it gets done, who would he fight in the United Kingdom? He's already taken out 2 of their unbeaten champions at this weight. The people over there in the UK, they don't have any world champions in the neighboring divisions, 160 or 175. So if Canelo Alvarez wants to go to the United Kingdom to fight someone, who would that be? I mean, I know that he said this, I just don't know how feasible it is. It can happen with the right dance partner, but in this situation, who's the right dance partner? So I'm telling you, the sooner they get this Caleb Plant fight done and get it over the line, the sooner he can get all these other guys out there.
Guys, everybody's begging him to fight.
Guys begging for a fight. The sooner he gets this Plant fight over the line and out of the way, the sooner he can get to all those other guys. Because while he might be receptive to fighting in the United Kingdom, I don't know how likely that is when there's a scarcity of dance partners that he could fight in the United Kingdom. I mean, if you're going to have him fighting over there, you would have him fighting over there presumably against a fighter from over there. And right now, there ain't no fighters over there holding belts at 160, 168, or 175. Most of the fighters, The ones that are left, at or around these weights, Demetrius Andrade, Jermall Charlo, David Benavidez, all these different guys. These are American-based fighters, based out of America. American fighters, born and bred American fighters. That being said, these are the candidates, the likeliest candidates for what would be Canelo Alvarez's very next fight if he can get the Caleb Plant fight out of the way. And one of those candidates, Demetrius Andrade, took to his social media, left caption that reads, "We got future of boxing fighting Lenny Montiel, Gennady Golovkin and Ryota Murata waiting until New Year's to unify. When either one can fight with me over the summer, what the fuck is going on? Top Rank, Matchroom, DAZN, Max Kellerman, PBC on Fox, Sports Illustrated Chris Mannix. 4 main champs in a division, not one got their titles by beating a current champion. Ryota Murata, future of boxing, were handed their belts. Gennady Golovkin won a vacant title, like I did, even though I was gonna whoop Billy Joe Saunders' ass until he got busted for pets."
He's not wrong.
And he's not excluding himself from that short list of fighters that didn't have to beat a champion in order to be a champion. It's the truth. Those are cold hard facts. Ryota Murata was elevated to WBA champion after Canelo Alvarez relinquished his title in that division because he's all done there. Gennady Golovkin, he fought Sergey Derevianchenko for the vacant IBF title, Canelo's vacant IBF title. Same applies to Jermall Charlo, more or less. He got elevated after Canelo Alvarez was French fried or franchised or whatever the fuck it is. Lest we forget, Canelo Alvarez isn't just a franchise champion. He was the inaugural franchise champion, the first franchise champion of any kind, of which there are now 2. It's Canelo and it's Teofimo, with the difference being Canelo Alvarez actually holds a WBC world title, holds that version of a title in the super middleweight division.
168.
He's not limited to that franchise designation the way that Teofimo is at 135 pounds. Back to the point, Demetrius Andrade is simply iterating the truth of it in the middleweight division. One of the glamour weights, what once was one of the glamour weights, now cold product, because everybody wants to be a wallflower. Nobody wants to get on the dance floor. Nobody but Demetrius, it seems. The middleweight division is considered one of the glamour weights, one of the most historically significant divisions in the sport of boxing. Historically, from a historical perspective. And it's the weirdest thing because this was one of the hottest divisions not that long ago. It wasn't that long ago. Cotto, Canelo, Golovkin, Canelo Jacobs, all these different fights. There was buzz around fights like Jacobs versus Charlo. Buzz around fights like Charlo versus Andrade. Hell, we're still waiting for that, though it's not looking encouraging. It's not looking promising. And there's no excuses for it. It can't be justified. This division stands apart. 4 titles split 4 ways between 4 different guys that ain't fighting each other. And a fight between them, any one of the 2, would be better than what they have been doing thus far. Granted, that a Golovkin versus Murata fight, it does make a lot of sense. But what don't make sense is waiting until New Year's Eve to have it.
Give me a fucking break.
One of the biggest problems is that these fighters are happy to sit out and avoid each other, save Demetrius Andrade, who I think would take a fight with Jermall, I think would take a fight with Ryota Murata, and I think would take a fight with Gennady Golovkin. One of the problems is that these fighters are happy to avoid each other, do interviews talking about other fighters that they're not fighting. That's one problem. And yet another problem is that the fans, those fighters' fans, they keep enabling them to do this. Jermall Charlo's got a small faction of fans, a very small army of guys who think that unless he's fighting Canelo Alvarez, it's okay for him to fight Jaime Munguia's sloppy seconds and Daniel Jacobs' sloppy seconds. And in reality, there's no excuse for it. There is no excuse for Jermall Charlo to not fight Demetrius Andrade.
There isn't.
His fans are making excuses for him. Tom Brown is making excuses for him.
He said he could be ready for Canelo in September.
Knowing that Canelo Alvarez is looking to fight Caleb Plant and become the super middleweight division's undisputed champion, he knows this the way I know this, the way you know this. And this is what he's talking about. I can be ready for Canelo in September, knowing that in all likelihood you won't fight Canelo in September. What you should be looking to do in September is unify titles with Demetrius Andrade. Because even if Gennady Golovkin don't want you and he don't want him, you guys can still fight each other. And you can't fucking convince this guy to do it. This is the middleweight division's problem.
Demetrius is right.
It's Gennady Golovkin's fault. just as much as it's Jermall Charlo's fault. To some extent, it's Ryota Murata's fault, too. He's going to need a tune-up fight before he takes on any one of these guys. But is he planning on taking on any one of these guys? Because if he doesn't, then he's culpable as well.
Demetrius is right, man.
And finally, the time has come to assign merit. Assign the merit for Josh Taylor's big win yesterday, last night's unification match, undisputed junior welterweight title fight between Josh Taylor and Jose Ramirez. Josh Taylor emerged the victor, as I expected, as some of you out there expected. And as a result of that, Josh Taylor advances from the number 8 spot on the Ring IQ Pound4Pound list to the number 5 spot on the Ring IQ Pound4Pound list, ahead of Mexico's own Juan Francisco Estrada, ahead of Brooklyn's own Teofimo Lopez, and ahead of America's own, Texas's own, Jermell Charlo. One might feel so inclined to ask whether or not it makes sense for Josh Taylor to occupy a top 5 spot. What's the rhyme and the reason behind that? What's the school of thought? It's simple. Josh Taylor actually participated in the World Boxing Super Series tournament and won. He won the tournament. He became
unified
the Lineal and Ring Magazine champion in the process of doing so, winning the coveted Muhammad Ali Trophy. Defended the 2 titles he procured as a result of winning that tournament at least once against Apinun Konsong. Subsequently moved on from that to become this division's undisputed champion against the then unbeaten Jose Ramirez. And he did all of this in only 18 professional fights, less than 20 fights. Josh Taylor's last 6 opponents, his last 6 fights, with the last 6 fighters that he fought, those guys have a combined record of 136 victories and only 1 loss. That is the caliber, that is the quality of Josh Taylor's competition. Josh Taylor, who himself doesn't even have 20 fights. You talk about how Josh Taylor stacks up against his contemporaries. How does he stack up against Juan Francisco Estrada, Teofimo Lopez, Jermell Charlo, Errol Spence Jr., Oscar Valdez? What you can immediately start off by saying is that none of those fighters have ever been undisputed champions, the way that Josh Taylor is currently an undisputed champion. Some of them are very close.
Closer than others.
But none, not even young Teofimo Lopez, have a full stake in the claim of being an undisputed champion. Josh currently occupies the number 5 spot on the list. For now, he does. But that spot is up for grabs. He's ahead of Juan Francisco Estrada right now, but not by much. Because Juan Francisco Estrada, like Josh Taylor, has unseated 3 active reigning world champions, with the difference between them being that Juan has been a champion in more than one division, whereas Josh is not. Josh has only been a champion, undisputed or otherwise,
at one weight.
Juan has been a champion at flyweight and super flyweight, whereas Josh has only been a champion in the junior welterweight division. Juan beat 3 active reigning world champions in Brian Viloria
for the WBA and WBO flyweight titles.
Juan beat Sor Rungvisai for the WBC super flyweight title, and Juan, quote-unquote, beat Chocolatito Roman Gonzalez for the WBA title, thereby unifying both the WBC and WBA super flyweight titles. I will say that that's a dubious victory. That was a dubious decision that a lot of people had a problem with, a lot of controversy, and that's why that's a victory that has an asterisk over it. They're supposed to have a rematch very soon, and if Juan can win that rematch in better fashion than, the last fight did, than he did the last time,
he may advance.
That explains why Josh Taylor is currently ranked ahead of Juan Francisco Estrada. Comes to Teofimo Lopez, well, he's beaten more active world champions than Teofimo Lopez, 3-2. Josh has beaten 3, Teofimo has beaten 2. There's no dispute as far as whether or not Josh Taylor is undisputed. He is undisputed. There are no franchise champions at 140 pounds. There is no dispute over franchise and French fries the way there is with Teofimo Lopez. Teofimo is the WBC's franchise champion at 135. The world champion at 135 is Devin Haney. In that way, there is dispute over Teofimo Lopez's status as an undisputed champion, whereas there's no dispute with Josh. He's undisputed, and that's it. Jermell Charlo, similar situation to Teofimo in the sense that Jermell Charlo, he beat 2 active reigning world champions.
2 of them.
One in Tony Harrison and another in Jason Rosario, whereas Josh beat 3. Beat 3 world champions to Jermell's 2. The same applies to Errol Spence Jr.
He beat 2 world champions.
But unlike Josh, He's not undisputed, that's 1. He's not lineal, that's 2. And he's not Ring Magazine champion, that's 3. Comparatively, Josh Taylor has done more at 140 in 18 fights than Errol Spence Jr. has done in the welterweight division.
27 fights.
There's just a lot less fluff in Josh Taylor's resume than what you will find in Errol Spence Jr.'s resume. Thus, he achieved undisputed Ring Magazine and lineal status faster than Errol Spence has. Errol Spence has yet to achieve any of those accolades, in spite of having more fights than Josh Taylor, because I reiterate, there's less fluff. Comes to Oscar Valdez. Oscar Valdez is a 2-division champion, but so far he's only beaten 1 active reigning champion in Miguel Berchelt in the super featherweight division. His consideration for his rank is that as a featherweight, he won the vacant WBO title and defended it 6 times. He subsequently moved on from that, moved up to super featherweight, took on it's arguably the most dangerous guy, what was the most dangerous guy, or one of the most dangerous guys in the division, in Miguel Berchelt, and beat him emphatically. Though he does fall short of the mark in comparison with many of his contemporaries. He hasn't beaten as many world champions as the other guys ranked ahead of him, and he's never been lineal, never been Ring Magazine, never been undisputed, so there's more work needs doing, and that's why he's currently in the most danger of being bumped off this list. The one update that you need to look out for is that very soon, Jermell Charlo is set to be fighting for undisputed in his division against Brian Castaño. If he wins that fight, he will advance, and he might land ahead of Teofimo Lopez and ahead of Juan Francisco Estrada as well.
Keep your eyes peeled for that.